Hey everybody, so I wanted to go ahead and record some videos for you all to give you some feedback on how to improve these pieces. So I'm just going to go through the entire list one at a time. If you have a sync sketch file in here, I'll use that, and if you don't, I'll probably drag your file into Photoshop and use that. So just to start off talking here, this is Eli Crawford. And so if we watch, you said that you had some technical issues. Couple of things I'm kind of noticing is that your hands are swimming just a little bit from there to there on this hand here. So let me see, and you'll see like that's the location of that hand, and then a frame or so later it slides over in this direction. And so I think that that's going to give you some difficulties a little bit later on here. So my 2 cents will be to make sure that your arms are in IK in all of these, just so you have, is this the size? Yeah. Make sure that these are in IK just so you can lock those hands in place. Otherwise you're going to have a hard time keeping them in that place. And that may mean that you have to rekey the arms in all of these poses if they're not already in IK. But otherwise I'm really liking what you have here. Just, still not finished, and I think you'll definitely want to submit a revision here before long. I'm trying to see if there's anything that catches my eye. Not really. I think I kind of mentioned some stuff in the previous video, and I kind of see you doing it there, like that swing down with the arm to reach out for this one. I think your line of action and all of your poses are really solid. Keep moving forward on it. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. So, Brendan, Frangipani, excuse me, let me give me a sip of water. So, let's go ahead and watch through yours. So, just the quick notes. Excuse me. So, just the quick notes. I feel like your walk is getting better. The only problem is he gets lower and lower and lower every, at least like through these steps here. You can see how high his hips start, and they get lower here. I kind of like this wobble you have going on with the hips, and you also seem to have like a little bit of a double bounce to get it feeling a little peppier. And the only problem is it feels like you're only really rotating that hip controller that is like right here, right? And you're just rotating that back and forth in this direction. And so that's giving you, draw that a little bit better, back and forth in that direction. And so that's making the entire spine just feel very stiff if you're not using any of those other controls or offsetting on that. So if you remember on the pendulum, right, we had these different pieces. And as this one rotated, this one maybe would drag behind, and then this one maybe drag behind, and so it would get this loose feeling. I think you need that same thing happening up the spine and in the head, where right now the spine and the head just kind of feel locked in that position. You also start in a very stiff position, so like the toes are very straight. This hand, like that, just feels very unnatural. Very stiff here, very stiff line of action and contrapposto. And so like I think all of that stuff just needs to be, like this just needs to feel like a more natural pose at the beginning. The arm motion needs a lot of overlapping action. So like as he comes forward here, you would maybe drag the arm or drag the forearm and hand a little bit more, just to get the upper arm leading. And then as he goes through, then you could have this follow through here, and then as it's coming back here, you would maybe drag this a little bit more. And so it's going to start feeling like that pendulum action as well. we get to this jump, and again, everything gets very stiff and perfect, right? Like both of these, the hand is perfect across there, like the knees are perfect, like it's very dull. Right? That's not very like parallel lines are not as exciting as angled lines. And so just by shifting like 1 foot forward a little bit, and if 1 foot was just a little further forward here, then you could get some more angle in the hips, more angle in the shoulders, more angle in the head. Maybe one arm's doing something a little different than the other. And then this pose just gets a little bit more dynamic and interesting. So just some ideas there. There's a handful of technical issues, stuff like toe going through the floor, again foot floating right there. You get this push off, like that feels like it's timed okay, but then the travel across feels very flat. It doesn't feel like his hips are going in an arc. They just feel like they kind of slide forward. His feet land perfectly at the same time, and again, you're getting this very dull pose because it's not got any contrast or angles in it. And then as soon as his feet hit, like they do this weird, like they slide back a little bit at first, and then they slide forward to this ending pose. Which I think occasionally, you'll get, like even with the little example I was doing, you get just a little bit of foot slide, but it starts to look like he's almost on an escalator or like like one of those moving like sidewalk things, like in the airport. And so there's again some more little technical things. The foot's off the ground. Some of this stuff here, like again, like no contrapposto. There's really not a lot of contrapposto anywhere in any of this. So like again, no contrapposto. Everything's in these perfect parallel angles. And so like I would say look at your reference and find areas where you can find that. And then also just start noticing like stuff like this silhouette here is just a little muddy. Like if you had like the elbows out like this, maybe that would make more sense or something, or just make a clearer silhouette. Okay, so go ahead and close that one. And we are pulling from project 1. So we got the first two. Chris, I know you said you put some stuff in the revisions folder, so I'll go ahead and pull that up. Looks like you have something in Sync Sketch. So cool. We will paste it right there. I've already logged in 100 times. There we go. So I think this is the one you have up there. Yeah, this is feeling pretty good so far. I can't remember if the character is going to be talking here or if it just sort of turns to the camera. I like a lot of your poses, like this. I like this pose, like right through here. I like how that looks. Always little things to look out for, but I wouldn't worry about it just yet. Like this little point where the tail kind of crosses there. I think right now what I would consider is I think you need some lead and follow in all of this. So let's get red will work. So let's say this is this torso mass, this is the hip mass, this is this head mass, right? I think what you need to see is as the character starts to stand up, can I turn on ghosting? There we go. Let's see if I can start to do this. So as this character starts to stand up, this piece should stay there for several frames on the ground, right? And then this piece is the thing that should start moving forward. So I think I didn't greater than. No. Did I just mess something up? How did that work? Yeah. the arrows. Okay. So like, this is on the ground, or this is stationary, and like as you watch them stand up, it feels like both of those masses come up at the same time. And I think you can sort of build into the poses that this mass starts to lead while this one's still on the ground, and maybe the head starts to lead. And so you start getting, like, maybe the head goes first and the chest isn't moving quite as much. And so now if we turn those off, you should be able to see like the head goes first, the chest goes next, and then on here the hips would go ahead and start to follow. So let's see if that makes sense now. A little bit more like that. Right, so I think you're going to start to tend to put some of that in there. Just, I know that like that's really something more in the polish pass later when you're offsetting stuff, but really you can be a lot to do with your posing as well, because it has a lot to do with the distance between these two objects, right? How far apart those are. And so I think you start to see some of that through here as well. Like maybe as these back feet are both on the ground, this mass should stay here, but then this mass should sort of lead a little bit more. And then after it gets to where both of those feet are on the ground here, this mass here catches up, if that makes sense. I think, I don't know how the controls are on the rig though, but I think like just watching it right now, it feels like how a quadruped should feel is you have your hip mass, your chest mass, and those two aren't going to change, and then you have this squishy stuff in the middle, right? And so as those let's just do two. Let's just do one. Okay, so as those two pieces get closer together, right, it's this part in the middle that just bulges, right? And so really your squash and stretch then is or not your squash and stretch, but I keep forgetting. It's really just this, you know, distance between how those two squash and stretch to change that volume in the middle. And I think that's the part that you can probably push a little bit more of that in the posing. I think you'll definitely be able to get it. Like you got it right there happening a lot. Like you're pushing these two as close together. I think I'll probably push the whole thing down just a little bit more for some anticipation, and maybe curl this even more just to get like really scrunch him up. And the reason for that is because just a few frames later right here, you want to really stretch them out as much as you can, right? And again, like you also get an opportunity there to sort of change your line of action, right? You can go from this scrunched up curve to this stretched out arc back, right? And so I think that's really what I would be pushing for on all of that. Just kind of looking at how this works. I think your poses are looking really good though. I really like how this hand comes forward and does that. You may want to try breaking that up just a little bit and putting like the index claw finger, whatever, being a little higher or something like that. But I mean, I like the spirit of that pose, I guess. So just a little bit more dynamic finger poses. I love this head pose right now. I would say one of my comments is I would probably start this off a little bit closer, maybe something like that. And then if you need to pull out all the way to where you are by here. But I mean, you may also be able to pull that away with, like, if this is the end of this shot and you're right here, then maybe you do a camera cut at that point to wherever he ends up. So yeah, I think this is looking good. I think just keep moving forward with it. I know you're kind of aiming at like 2 projects long. I think we need to figure out how you want to break up the grading on this. So I may give you just kind of a placeholder grade, and we can talk about it a little bit more. I just want to make sure that the grade I give you is not misleading. Yeah. So yeah, let's chat about that a little bit more over the next little while here. Okay, next class or next project, we are Zane. Okay. So yeah, this is the one with the. So I think you picked a particularly hard one, and I think some of this is because it's not really because of the action she's doing. It's actually because of this little thing right there. Look at what her foot does between frames 42 and 49. Right? She pivots on her toe, and for that to read, like, I'm just going to draw a foot over here really quick. Oh, that's a terrible color. Let's do like. This is a character's foot, right? So you have several points in which that foot can sort of contact the ground, and how she's shifting her weight forward to where she's pivoting right here. And so for that to read, that pivot point on the toe has to stay perfectly on there. And I think on yours, you're getting like some sliding, and it doesn't help that the camera moves there too, to make it a little bit confusing. So my 2 cents, the biggest thing is I would just take out the camera entirely. I think that's going to help a lot. A couple other things is like I think you can kind of see it here if we look. Like as she goes from here to here, her hips kind of nudge in this direction just a little bit, to where if you look, this is her base of support, and if we were to draw sort of this like volume above it, she's kind of pushed her butt out there to kind of help balance the fact that this weight is over on the other side. So really, that's the only base of support she has, is that foot. And so she kind of shifted her weight and sort of bent a little bit to kind of keep herself in balance. Right? Your character, however, does not have that as much. Right? Like he needs his butt sticking out over here over this leg. And I think you almost need to start with that, because even here she's starting with up on 1 foot, but again, that's his base of support, and if that's his base of support, all of this mass is over top of the other side of it. It's not being supported by that. Gravity is still pulling down on that and going to cause him to tip over. So he's out of balance from the very beginning. To maintain his balance, you really have to get a lot of this side-to-side shift in the hip control, or the root control. I have a feeling, even though we're not looking at it from that angle, the same thing happens here. That if we were looking at him from behind this base of support, he needs to sort of move away from the camera a little bit to make sure he's over that. So that's the biggest thing. I think you picked a piece here about a person losing their balance, and the problem is your character is out of balance the entire time. So it doesn't make sense to us. We're like, why did he fall there? The reason we can tell she falls is, watch this foot. Watch her foot when it slips out. See, she's over or she's falling over right now. She's trying to get that other leg to catch her, but before it does, her left leg slips out from under her, right? And then when her right leg hits the ground, it skids too. And she eventually catches and maintains. The last thing that kind of is different here is the thing that keeps her butt from hitting the ground is she gets that foot underneath her. And your character, the foot's still over there. So I think his foot needs to get up here underneath him if you don't want him to land completely on his butt. I would probably just go ahead and have him hit the ground and keep the foot similar to what you have here. But look what's happening here. Her base of support now is different. It's that foot, and that foot. And that means all of this mass is supported, right? And so she's okay there. For her to stand back up, though, she has to lean forward, and she's still holding herself with that hand until she's leaned forward enough to where that base of support can support her. Your character doesn't do that. He starts moving his hand from the very beginning, and so now his base of support is up here, right? But all of his weight is still this mass that's just floating over nothing. So there's just a lot of weight issues in this, and that's hard to show when what you're trying to show is she loses her balance. So I think that you have the foundation for it here. It's going to take a lot of little small elements of polish to pull this together into to being more clear. But it's a great, I think it's a great base pass for your posing and blocking plus. I think from there it just needs to just continue to polish on it and spline it. My big notes are it just feels like it needs way more splining. Okay. Go to Amy. Link to sync sketch. So I know me and you kind of looked at this one-on-one. I think I think my 2 cents is I think you're almost trying to do too much here. Like you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 leaps here, right? To give you an example, when I used to give a similar assignment to this, I limited them to 3. Actually, you're doing 7, aren't you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, maybe it is 6. So I think that's part of it. I think I would limit it to one section of it, either from here maybe up to here, or from here over to here, and then I would just focus on that part. The other thing is there's so many tiny little steps. I think I counted 20 or 30 steps. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 if you count that jump. So yeah, it looks like you have 21 steps, maybe more, in this whole thing. And each time your character takes a step, you need to make sure that one foot is firmly planted on the ground. And then, so right here, you'll see, the character's rear foot, it'll be his left foot, comes up off the ground. And so during this section right here, nothing is supporting them. He just kind of floats over there. And then that foot contacts and goes flat. So now that foot's supporting them. But before this other foot, that foot gets on the ground, we're okay. But here's an example. Right there, there's nobody really supporting that foot. Right? Let me look really quick here. Is this the final version? Yeah, I think so. I guess my last note is I would still get in there kind of close. I would still get in there much closer on this shot if you can. And I think with each of these, you really need the first pass of stuff I would worry about. You get little stuff the foot's floating right here. But the first pass of stuff I would worry about is the fact that it is the hips and the feet correlation, and it needs to feel kind of natural too. Like that's the problem with the with this project, or that's the difficulty with this project, I guess, is that it's very easy to get sucked into how difficult this whole process is, and just step back and say, does it look correct to me, right? And I think there's a lot of stuff that feels very stiff and kind of robotic. I think some of that is to do with you can push some of the poses just a little bit more, and then some of it has to do with this floaty thing that is happening on some of the steps. On the steps that are not being floaty, the character's kind of stepping a little flat-footed. Like, for example, that foot is flat on the ground, and then he kind of just puts his foot flat down, and he just kind of does these, like, it's almost like a duck walk, because he's just sort of laying his feet down flat on each step instead of hitting on one part of his foot and rolling to it. And the points where you do have it rolling, like right here, it kind of hits on the ball or the heel, and then like it just rolls. Well, let's make an example. You can see some other spots there where the character gets floaty. Well, no, I'm not seeing what I thought I was going to see. So your poses are here. I think once you get some of that stuff worked out a little bit more, that's really that pass between the feet and the hip control. After you do that, I think the next step would be loosening up the spine a little bit, because the character's spine, yeah, I mean, you get some curves in here, but it feels like you need some contrast. Like right there where it's angled back, right? I like this. Like you get this curve back, right? This is a good pose. Well, when the character lands right here, I would push them on down, right? Something into like this, right? And that way you're getting a contrast between this curve back and this curve forward, right? Yeah, and then finally, just like this arc, feels like you just kind of, it's like there really isn't an arc. He just kind of goes in sort of a straight line there. And so I think you need him to kind of jump up and land, or at least have some form of like believable arc over to that wall. Okay. Let's see who's next. Wyatt. So I really like the fall down at the end of it. Like the fall into the hole. I like a lot of the things you have going on here with a climb over as well. Like I think you have this, like right here. I like that he gets to this pose, and then he realizes the easiest way for him to get there is to lead with this foot. Right? And that foot goes up and over, and then sort of pulls his chest up, right? Like right there. So I think that looks good. I think you can kind of loosen it just a little bit. Maybe have the rotation in the hips being led a little bit by a rotation in the chest. Maybe the chest can sort of rotate forward a frame or two before that rotation happens. But I like a lot of that. I kind of even like the fact that this is a little trippy at first. Like you're not really sure what exactly is happening. The parts that feel a little weird to me or need a little bit work, you're right, that kind of pops right there a little bit, so just ease into that. All of this pull up here, if you look at how, like, so when he's on the ground, right, gravity's always pulling on him. The thing that's keeping him from falling is the fact that his feet are pushing, right? By the time he gets to probably right there, right, the feet aren't what's pushing him anymore, or what's keeping him off the ground. Now what's keeping him off the ground is that his hands are pulling. And so I would expect to see some of that result on this mass, right, on his chest, right? So just to kind of give you an idea, like I always talk about the pelvis, the rib cage, the head, right? But you have your arms and you have your feet. Now, if your feet push up against push against the ground, usually that affects this mass first. And what happens is that mass moves first, and then this mass feels it later, or finds out about it later, and moves like a frame or two later, right? So I think it's the same thing here, like, except in the opposite, right? If we have, let's go one frame later. If we have this mass, this hips, legs, right? If the arms pull the character upward, right, then what's going to happen is this mass is going to move first, and it's going to sort of stretch out in the middle here a little bit, and then pull this mass up. So I was kind of showing, I think I showed this on Chris's earlier, and we can kind of do this on a few frames out here as individuals. Like, let's say we have this. I'll go to the next frame where I can see it. I'll leave that one where it is, and I'll make this one start moving first. Right, maybe even go 2 frames into it. Have it continue to move upward, right? And then as we do that, then we can start moving this one upward after that. And so I'll just kind of finish this up to show you. So now if we click through those, right, we start with this. That first mass starts moving. Let's go ahead and take that ghosting off. First mass starts moving, and it pulls that second mass up. Of course, I did not stay on model at all. All my masses got bigger. But as this first one moves up, it pulls the second one up behind it, right? And I think that's what you're wanting in the chest, is to feel like that's happening. That as he takes on that weight and starts to pull himself up, I would expect to see during some of this, these two masses, it's more like this lower mass would start to kind of pull up to the chest, right? The other thing is, like, if this is his base of support and gravity's pulling in this direction, he feels like that takes a lot of weight to kind of hold himself out with that arm. I think you need to tuck these elbows in, and like he needs to be pulling himself up with his elbows like that and kind of curling himself up a little bit more. One of the last things I would sort of point out was sort of at the beginning here, this look around. Feels like the hips are leading the rotation and then the head's getting there later. And I think I would do it the other way around. I think I would have the head lead the rotation and the hips get there later. And you can kind of even see opportunities for overlapping action here as we go from here to up on the wall. Right? You can kind of see that everything kind of hits close to the same time right there. And so I just, kind of breaking that up a little bit. Maybe he starts reaching up to the wall before he even starts turning, and then his head and chest lead that before his foot even picks up off the ground. The other little thing to kind of consider here is, like, during this step forward, right, his hips start moving forward at the same time his foot picks up off the ground. So really, for that to happen, something has to be pushing him. And if his rear foot there is picking up off the ground, then nothing is pushing him. Like, that foot would probably come up off the ground last. And so what I would do is, like, start to move the character's hips forward while this foot is still back here, feeling like it's pushing the hips forward. Right? And then that's going to make that feel a little bit more realistic. So, all right, who's next? Caroline. Doesn't look like you put a file in there, so I am going to open yours up in Photoshop. So I think if you go back, you'll probably hear me talk about this a little bit more in Chris's and a couple of others. Again, you got this mass, and then whatever's happening in between is is just this squishiness in the middle, right? And really what you need is some push and pull in between those two to make those closer or further away. And if you see it in the side view, like, they don't really seem like they're doing that very much. They seem pretty stiff through there. Now I like what you're getting here, although you're seeing a little bit of a head bobble right there, as the head, like, if that chest rotates, if this chest rotates in this direction, right there, I think what would happen is that the head would kind of drag behind just a little bit, right? And so trying to think about how this would work. So let's it's going to be hard to frame by frame this because it would take a long time to do it. But like, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the reason that chest goes is because the head moves this way first, right? And so really, if you have these three masses, they're kind of going to be they're all going to be going back and forth in this direction, right? But the time in which they do that is going to change. And so I think what you would want it to do is you'd want it to feel like the head, I think, you're wanting it to feel like the head is kind of leading that, right? So if we were to watch those three masses move, right now it feels like what's really happening is that we're getting some rotation from maybe this point that's rotating those other two masses side to side. And instead, I think what you want it to feel like is that, like, this one is leading and all of these are connected to it by a string. And so as this one goes to this side, a few frames later, maybe even 5 frames later, this one goes to this side, right? So like, it may still be traveling in this direction. You know, and I think I can do this in Maya kind of quickly to show you. So we'll just do, all right, we're already in the top view. Cool. Top view. D. And so you're using a tiger here, so that's a little bit bigger, right? So we'll say this is the chest and the head. I'm just going to do, let's try 30 frames. And so 10 of them, I'll move it this way. 10 of them, I'll move it this way. Right. And then just to make this loop forever, we'll go to View Infinity, and then we'll say Curves Pre-Infinity Cycle, Curves Post-Infinity Cycle. And so now they're just going to cycle forever, right? Now what I can do, just to kind of fix this a little bit, I can do that and that on each of those, just to fix this. That one I fixed already. Okay, so this is kind of what we have now, right? I think the way you would do this is you would take this one and make it move first. Right? So if I guess probably how I would do that is just offset these to move later. So I'll grab these. I'm going to set those like maybe like 3. Let's try 3 poses behind, and then set these 2 poses behind, right? And so when we see this moving, you're going to get like that, right? Now again, I may be wrong on this. It may not be like that. It may be that the let's just undo all of those. So yeah, now we're okay. So the other thing it could be is it could be that these two are a little bit later, or yeah, something like this, and then you're going to end up with like that. But I don't think it's that. I actually still think that this head is probably moving first. Right? So again, like probably something like that is my thinking. And then the offset on those may be way bigger than I even think. Like it may be something like this, and this one may be way back here. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about with that. Now, if you look at this, what you're going to get in this motion, like imagine as this character is traveling forward, if you just kind of had a sine wave on here, right? Let's go in and show you like a very subtle sine wave. That's pretty much always going to be your character's line of action. The difference is, well, I can show you with the sine wave in Maya. The difference is, create a box, put a deformer, nonlinear sine, just so you can see this. And then I'm going to hide that box, control. I'm going to hide everything except for the sine wave. Oh, yeah, just so we can see it from this angle. Like this is our edge, right? But if we were to put a sine on this, like some amplitude, right? The way the tiger is going to move is going to feel a little bit like this as it walks, right? Like that's an exaggeration of it, but I think that's what you're kind of going for from that top view. And I'm talking about this for a long time, but I think that that's really going to loosen some stuff up. That and a combination of a little bit of like squash and stretch of that central section. So I am going to, let me go ahead and look at the end of it. I think the last few things are actually just sort of this head arc still feels kind of bobbly. Like everybody talked about it, like it kind of feels like the character's limping just a little bit. And I think part of the reason for that is if you notice how this foot travels backwards, it travels backwards pretty smoothly and then it kind of stops for a little while. This one right here travels backwards and then it just kind of hesitates. And that really wouldn't happen if the character was constantly progressing forward. What that makes it feel like is it slows down on that foot. And I think that just needs to be cleaned up a little bit to where when the feet are on the ground, they're moving back linearly. So, all right, where are we at on this list here? Project 1. So we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. So let's go ahead and go through a couple more here really quick. Dusty. Okay, so my 2 cents is that, like, to me, if I were running at this to jump off of it, I wouldn't do it at a glancing angle. Like, I think I would be running at this in this direction. That way he could hit it here and bounce off in this direction. And that's a little bit of work to change that, but not major. Like, you can probably do it just by shifting some curves. I think it would also help with this really awkward, like, how do you get up here to push off? Because he's having to change directions here for this jump, and that's not super easy to do, right? But if he's sort of bouncing off of it from here, then he's taking that energy here, squashing in at this point, and then jumping this way. And so that's a little easier. So I think that's what I would do, and it would fix some of this awkwardness of getting up here on this first pose. Because I think this stuff's feeling much better. I really like these poses. To me, he kind of eases out from here, and you kind of want him to pop out. So I'd squash him down a little bit more there, and then pop him over to here, so you get like that surge of energy. Like the reason he jumps is because he's pushing against the wall, and he sort of squash down in, and push and stretch out in the middle, hit here and squash down again. Right there. Same here. He would squash down, push, and like right here is arc. Like he kind of jumps, he moves upward. And so if you look at his arc on this, it kind of looks like up and then over. Right? I think it needs to, again, you want these to feel like these curving arcs from each of these. And they can be shallower. They don't have to be quite that deep. The last thing, like right here, like I don't really get him. It feels like you're trying to show him like grabbing the sides, and he misses or can't get a hold. And even though that's probably how he really would do it, like maybe you could just have him like putting his hand here, like he's trying to do something like this, or I don't know, something to, like this just gets a little confusing. It's almost like he's like petting the side of it or something. And then when he swings back, you get these arm gestures here that really need to go in these like nice swoopy arcs as he's going down. And right now they're kind of going like back in a swoopy arc, but when they come back, they go straight and straight. And so just kind of playing around with those arcs to clean that up. I like the hit on the ground here, but like then it just like ends right there, like before it completes it. It's almost like you need 10, 15 more frames to sort of finish that action up. Maybe a little more. It's kind of your call. But it just feels like it's a cliffhanger. Like I don't get to see the end of the motion, if that makes sense. Overall, it's actually looking pretty good, though. Okay, we already did Chris's. So now we're at Courtney's. Let's do Courtney's, and then I think I'm going to take a break because we'll be right at like an hour on this video. So, oh, got a lot of them. Wait, this is Dylan. Wait, did I click the wrong link? Let's see. Oh, there's two Joneses. My bad. We already did we already do Courtney's? Courtney's in a different class. Okay, that makes much more sense. Sorry about that. Okay, Dylan. I think that a lot of the notes in class were very clean on this. I think that head look up at the end right here is like happens a little too quickly over one frame, and then you get that pop to it. I think part of that is reading that way because the camera kind of is moving at that same time, and it's kind of coinciding with this wavy line here that also juts up, right? And so it almost feels like his face catches on this line, if you notice. Right? It's like, oh, I'm caught there, right? And then he surges forward. So that's when we talk about like coincidental line, I think that's where you're getting that. I think what you could help with that a little bit with the camera motion, maybe just take. I don't know. I mean, you may be able to just sort of start this a little bit further away. I really like where he's at, though. Like I don't, but it may be that. It may be. This may help just to get like some form of texture on the ground, even if it's just like, I don't know, like a little bit of grain or something on the ground. Something that it's the difference between those two frames are too stark, and it's both in the background and the face, and the only thing we have to, like, our eyes track things, and so right here the only thing our eyes are tracking is this line, because all of this is too similar, and his hair, and then right here our eyes continue to track that line and it jumps up and our eyes catch his face just for that 1 or 2 frames before it hits the ground. And so I think I would give a hint of the face right here. And maybe roll his head back a little bit more where you can see his forehead peeking up here. It would also allow you to kind of start to ease into this. Yeah, I think it really is just like those 2 frames there feel like a big surge forward in spacing, and I think I would just soften that surge forward on this frame right here. I think that's going to take care of most of it. Little things, like I really like what you got going on with the hands here. I think you could probably get a little bit more dynamic hand pose right through there, just a little bit. Like some of this is really funny. His foot doesn't seem like it quite connects with the ground there. Kind of subtle stuff. And then all the rest of this is feeling good. I love what you're doing with the hand here, because you get this like one last swipe right there. Like that's pro there. Like that looks really good. The little stuff here in the head, I think you need some eye darts in the eyes right through here. Maybe even like a little bit of, like, his eyes are just too perfect, and so just some little bitty subtle eye darts would help. And then I think this here just feels like that feels all in the head. I think you need a little bit more in the chest to rotate back with it, just really subtly. It's not that you have to actually rotate the chest back, it's that you have to feel like the chest reacted to his head rotating back, and kind of back forward too. So just a little bitty, like, go into the graph editor wherever that curve happens, put just a little bit of a curve in the chest rotating back, and you can kind of soften the head motion a little bit more like that too. Otherwise, like, this is looking really good to me. Like, this is a very solid piece. So, great job on that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop and take a little break, and then we'll come back and I'll get to the rest of you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that should work out pretty good. So we'll pick back up on Amy Ka when we get back. Cool. Talk to you soon.